Nice to see you all. And, we've been talking about integrated programs for kids. The question is, why do we need to integrate systems? And there we go. Why do we need to integrate systems? And the answer to that is that our children are oftentimes equally entitled to multiple systems all at the same time. They might be entitled to behavioral health or regional center services, but the problem is that they leave it up to the kid and their families to access those services individually because we're not integrated. And therein lies a problem because oftentimes there's many doors to those systems, and every one of those individual agencies has differing eligibility criteria. They have differing funding mechanisms and service restrictions. They use different data systems that don't communicate with one another, and they evaluate whether or not the child is actually making progress based upon different evaluation criteria and outcome expectations. And once a child and a family does actually make it through to a particular service, then they're oftentimes faced with great inequality among agencies across the state in terms of the accessibility of those services. Rural areas oftentimes don't have services available in the same way that urban areas do, or the quality of service or the application of service is inconsistently available. And because you have to first qualify for the service before the service is made available, then early intervention and prevention services are something that a child does not have access to. And that sets up a system where the child must actually fail first and wait until they become of a severe enough nature to actually access the services that they need. So obviously from all of these, we can conclude that our systems are broken, at least in terms of being able to provide continuity of service to the children that they are designed to serve. And that is because there really is a lack of accountability around common goals. This results in increased costs, and sometimes because systems don't have the funding necessary to be able to serve all the children that are in the system, they actually wait to serve, knowing that education as the payer of last resort must step in and pick that up. And that results in cost shifting among agencies and persistent disparities in terms of outcomes. So what models are out there where we're actually working together in the best interest of children? And there are a couple that can inform us about which way to go. The first is AB 2083, which is California's newest system of care legislation that is designed for those children who are in the foster care system who have the most significant exposures to trauma. Now, 2083 is instructive to us because it sets up at a state level an interagency leadership team that has the responsibility for overseeing how those services are provided throughout the state. It sets up mechanisms that provide for shared governance and shared fiscal responsibility, as well as data sharing. There is a dispute resolution mechanism built in, and there's also quality standards that all agencies throughout the state are supposed to abide by. Another system that is more familiar to schools is interconnected systems framework. An interconnected systems framework was specifically designed to be able to integrate school-based mental health into a school environment for those children who need behavioral health and mental health services. In that sense, it's non-categorical. You don't have to qualify for it first. If you need the service, you have access to it. And it provides for the full continuum through an interconnected systems framework or multi-tiered systems framework from prevention and early intervention all the way through to the most significant intervention. It's school-based because that's where the kids are. It provides for transdisciplinary teaming to decide what needs to take place on behalf of the child. It uses data to both make decisions as well as to evaluate the quality of the programs that are being implemented. Now the question winds up being for us whether or not we can integrate the best of these two systems in order to make policy decisions for the state. And the answer to that is yes, and we should do it. And it starts with designing a state cross-system governance body much like was contemplated in AB 2083, where you have a state level interagency leadership team that develops goals that are common across all of the agencies that are responsible for providing services to the child. And it provides incentives for local integration of resources. It evaluates the statewide effectiveness of the achievement of these cross-system goals, and it provides technical assistance at the local level for those who need that in order to be able to provide services to the child. At the local level, you have local systems that are also interagency in their nature, and they're responsible for evaluating how well they do in terms of meeting the cross-system goals, for identifying and aligning local outcomes for state goals, and for implementing the cross-system quality improvement. Now, we also need to minimize those barriers that stand in the way that keep us from being able to utilize these services. And that means we have to take the services to where the children are, which by necessity is going to make the services school-based and part of that full continuum of a three-tiered model that will be aligned behind common child-focused purposes and goals. We also need to design legislation that will promote the leveraging and the pooling of resources so that we can maximize the resources that are available to children across the state. The use of state education dollars for 50% match against Medicaid dollars, for example, is one example of the way that it's being used in other parts of the state. There needs to be cross-system technical assistance where we are collectively training everyone on what the evidence-based strategies are so that everyone takes responsibility for the shared outcomes for the child. And then we need to have systems where we can share data with one another and then use that data both for decision-making as well as continuous quality improvement so that we can design the systems as we go along to better meet the needs of the children. And finally, we need to make sure that we're involving both the family and the youth in the development of these systems, because we need to be able to identify the barriers that keeps us from being able to provide those services as appropriate to the families, and we need to be able to listen to their voice and to make adaptations as we move along in order to access. If we do this, we're going to wind up with a single system that is focused overall on healthy functioning of both the child and the family. And through an integrated system, we can better meet the needs of all children, not just those children who happen to meet the eligibility criteria for one specific service versus another.